Yay! It worked!
Oh my gosh, thank you. It's amazing how long 5 minutes goes. Hi, everybody. Thanks for hanging out, and thank you so much. Serena, it's nice to see you. Sorry for that awkward start. I'm usually
it's all right. You know what? We're all kind of at the mercy of Instagram here, right? So we just roll with it. Thank you, you guys, for staying on and just listening to me babble and chatter when we start.
Well, you're calming. It was nice. That was, I mean, being someone who starts a lot of Instagram lives, you do a good, first few minutes. It's entertaining. I'm usually awkward, you're good. That was great. I was listening the whole time trying to get in.
Oh, good. well, you know what? I have to give credit to our audience. I'm so grateful because I have a beautiful community of people, and they jump on and they're supportive because normally we do our lives between 1 and 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So the fact that we have several people on right now at 9 a.m., which is so kind of outside
you have a huge audience. There's a bunch of everybody together. I'm so excited to meet all of you and to share this information and to talk about your mental health, especially right now, because I know my mental health is challenged these days. So and I'm sure everybody else's is, and so I'm really excited to talk.
Yes, so we're excited that you're here, and I'm excited this all worked, and I'm excited that it's International Women's Day, so thank you for all the comments that have come through about that and acknowledging that. I'm going to share a post about that later on today as well. And again, just thank you guys so much for being so supportive and just chatting and going back and forth, and for all your hearts for Dr. Ramsey here, because he's just awesome. So Dr. Ramsey, okay, so you have some fans here, obviously, already. I'm like, obviously. And then we have some people that are new. So I would love if you could just give everyone a little bit of background and, your inspiration for writing this book before we dive into all the amazingness that's in the book.
Thank you so much. So hey, everyone, I'm Drew. I'm a physician and I'm a psychiatrist by training. So I'm really interested in brain health and mental health. And I've been in practice for almost 20 years, mostly in New York. I trained at Columbia, and I've stayed on it as a faculty member there, getting to teach the residents and medical students. But then during the pandemic, and maybe 2 or 3 years before, I'm also from rural Indiana. And actually, that's where, I never know what device I'm on. That's where I'm worried.
Is that where your farm is?
I was going to take this out and show everyone, and then I'm scared. This is where, this is the best.
Beautiful.
Worried to unplug. So we're here on our farm in southern Indiana. That's sort of fun part. So this is where we are.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And if you have followed me on Instagram, you've seen we've lost our chickens. So usually out there would be our beautiful chickens, and I've been really interested in this intersection between food and mental health. So I'm a practicing psychiatrist, and for any of you who know about mental health or in treatment, we don't talk a lot about food. And that just really struck me as a person interested in health. I was an athlete in college, and I was really interested in nutrition and just keeping myself really healthy. I was a low-fat vegetarian back then because that's what we were supposed to do. And I was finishing my training at Columbia, and I realized I didn't know enough about nutrition, and nobody was talking about it. And so I got really curious, and a lot of data started coming out. And so this book is really the summary of the research as it exists right now, and really how I hope everybody watching kind of upgrades how you think about your mental health. Like, so often when you think about me, or a person like a psychiatrist, you think about serotonin, you think about Prozac, and those are two interesting things that we can talk about. But there's so much going on right now in terms of the research and in terms of how it affects you, how we understand more about how your brain grows and protects itself, and how we really understand these things that, in some ways they've been out in the wellness world, kind of juju ideas like inflammation, or you should cut out gluten, or you should eat an anti-inflammatory diet. A lot of those words get used, and I think what's really exciting for me as somebody who's got a foot in kind of both of these worlds is how much excitement there is in both conventional medicine and in integrative or the wellness world, whatever we're going to call it, about how empowered we can be to take actions in our everyday life, and also how we're all talking about our mental health. I mean, there's like no silver lining in the pandemic. There's like, as I've said, but one thing that has shifted, two things really that bring nutritional psychiatry, the students field is called. This is like the longest self-intro ever, Serena. I'm sorry. But it is thinking we're all eating at home a lot more, and we're all thinking and talking about our mental health. Like everybody watching this has been like, at some point you felt overwhelmed or sad or desperate or grief or, I've cried more than, I'm like a 40, almost 47-year-old, like, man, like it's not like crying. At one point I was like crying. My wife I said, God, I was like crying in the shower. She's like, I've never done that. She's like, how have you gotten this far in life not crying in the shower? So anyway, so that's so I'm a psychiatrist. I'm interested in food and mental health. You saw my farm, and I'm a husband and a parent and a dad. So I think you should probably know that about me too. So I'm really interested in like where the rubber hits the road. Like how can this Instagram live? I know this is like totally maybe grandiose and strange, but how can it change you? And how can it actually change your brain cells? How can the ideas we talk about, how can that improve your mental health? How 6 weeks from now, how even today, can you start to feel a little different? And that's the empowering and exciting idea of nutritional psychiatry.
Yeah, no, and thank you so much for just that background, because I think it's so important for people to really connect and understand who our guests are and like their background and what their passion is, what made them passionate about writing and creating, because I know that there's so much work and so much energy and love that goes into the book. And I think that more now than ever, focusing on the ways that you can empower yourself to address your mental health is so important. Something that I actually talked a lot about last year. There you are. It's something that I actually talked about last year, just mental health and the different tools that we have that are just at our fingertips to help support that. And obviously with, my practice of culinary alchemy, focusing on nutrition, that integrative and functional nutrition is so important. And so I'm so very much in alignment with what you do and what you teach and what you share. So I'm so grateful that you're here. And we already have messages about how people are already buying your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I want to tell everyone, first of all, I just choked up. I'm cut for a second. Just like I want to thank you for that. It is a book is a lot of work, and I'm happy to share my creative process. I'm not one of these people who went to an Ivy League school and have been a writer my whole life. I've struggled with lots of things in my writing and my verbal skills, and a little tiny bit of dyslexia even. And so, and it was a lot during the pandemic in terms of this book went an idea and had been started in December, but in February we actually signed the contract. And a week later we were in quarantine. It's just like everybody else. I mean, I might be a shrink, and so I know a lot about processing feelings and emotions, but like you're still also just a human who's like all gloved up and all the PPE going to the grocery store for the first time, thinking all the old people are going to. I mean, it was a lot, and so and the book I really wanted it to be. I mean, this is my fourth book, so I wrote the Happiness Diet was my first book, and this is really about. This is like my education on like how food changed so dramatically, how that impacts our mental health. And then we have like all our giveaways going, so I never have all my books around. So it's right here.
No, it's great. Actually, I would love for you to say.
The Happiness Diet was I just learned a lot around nutrition and I think the misinformation that people have really gotten about what nutrition should be about. And then also it was a challenging thing to write a book and market it. And so then I wrote 50 Shades of Kale because I don't know.
Yes.
That's how my brain works a little
Love
bit.
That one.
And then everyone was asking me every place I went, like, oh, like how much magnesium are in beans? I'm like, what's a great selenium source? Or that one's Brazil now, that one's easy. But like what's the top source of vitamin B12? Like nobody knows the answer. It's clams, right? So then I wrote Eat Complete, which is it goes over 21 nutrients that really are the essential. Like iodine. It's just an interesting nutrient when it comes to brain health or omega-3 fats. So this all leads us up to this. And this, Serena is right. I put a lot of effort into this. And one of the reasons is I made sure to really try and represent all the science and all the data in the context of these great drawings that this really wonderful German graduate student, Katrin, did. to also, so many people hear about these words like inflammation, right? We pass them
Right, I
around,
love this
or the
one.
microbiome,
Yes.
or just to kind of, and I think there's also a little bit of how I learn. And a challenge I've had, I don't know whether other people have been having this challenge of is I'm all screen based.
Right.
It's amazing how much you can get done and how many people can see. It's amazing. We're connecting with hundreds of you right now. So I love all that. As much as I'm a country boy, it's just awesome to think about that, right? But at the same time, there's something about the constant sort of verbal and digital information that I feel like a drawing or a sketch. Yeah. I don't know. Sometimes when I'm there's too much going on. If I type in my little list of things to do, it's not as good as if I write it down on a piece of paper and then cross them out one by one. I don't know the other people.
I hear you. I do edits with a pen and I do highlights, and I'm so grateful for my sister and my team because they roll with that, whereas everyone does things on a Google Docs.
Right. Please edit in the Google Docs.
Can you figure that out? For me, I'm can you just print it all out for me? And
it allows you to sit with it. And I think you're also, maybe we're talking about, you asked about a little bit the creative process, because everybody, the reason I wrote this book, Need to Beat Depression and Anxiety, someone said, how do you know? And is that when we are depressed or anxious, and whether you're meeting clinical criteria or not, it takes away from some of our ability. A little anxiety is good, right? A deadline gets us really creative, but it takes away from our ability to really be most present in our lives and spread as much joy as we all have capacity to. And so making sure that you're feeding your brain, which is the center of your mental health, the center of your consciousness, there's a lot of data that's come out in the last 15 or 20 years. Some of these crazy stats, this one came out, there was a study in Vietnam, over 10,000 patients in a healthcare system there, and they looked at people with poor eating habits. And they found those people, I couldn't believe this finding, had a 1,000% increased risk of getting a clinical diagnosis of depression.
Yeah.
And just shows the power. Whereas if you went into quarantine, you still have a risk of depression that's increased. But if you're eating well, it insulates you. Or when patients were given a Mediterranean diet during a clinical trial, 33% of them went to full remission. So instead of another medicine or another type of psychotherapy, those things, I prescribe lots of medicine. I'm a traditional doc, and I do lots of psychotherapy. I love psychotherapy. I've been in psychotherapy forever. I just think it's a fascinating form of growing certain types of muscles and I guess pieces of self-awareness. It's just really exciting to have this other thing, because we all talk about it. We all eat. It's fun for me with patients where it's not like it dominates the treatment, but I treat a lot of men, for example, and when I've got a young guy and he starts so I was talking to a young guy, he's like, I don't know how to saute. I was like, bro, you know how to saute. And he's like, no. And then he tells me basically that he's been sauteing. I was like, that's sauteing. It's like, that's it. You just heat up a little olive oil and put it in. I'm like, that's the saute. He's like, oh. It's like, I thought it was something fancy. I was like, no, you saute great. And, then you get a little picture of, some sauteed greens and some eggs that someone makes. And they're engaging with you, with your treatment, most importantly with themselves in a way that, I really think it helps. And so, no matter what, I hope you all start really feeding your mental health. And I would love for you to pre-order the book and check it out, and check out the info on our website about it. And there's lots of great pre-order incentives, olive oil and all that stuff. But most important to me, whenever I have this many amazing brains, is that really, I'd ask you to make a promise, if I could, because it's just a promise to yourself, really start taking care of your mental health. And whatever that means to you, food's certainly one piece. It's definitely not the only thing I've done to take care of my mental health, but it's such a key and important piece, something that we really can actively do every day. So that's my request of everybody.
And I think that's such a beautiful request and such a beautiful reminder, Dr. Ramsey, because it's all a part of what makes us whole. People can be very focused on the physical aspects with their movement and their exercise. And, we have a lot of people who, I would say both sides of the spectrum. Some people are moving less because of the pandemic, but there are a lot of people who now have their mirrors and their Pelotons, or just different things, or just
those people who got better. I hit my all-time high weight, and I've not ever been somebody who's I've been really blessed that I sort of I've burned as many calories as I've eaten pretty much my whole life. I stayed around let's say 190, and I gained 30 pounds just out of nowhere.
Right, and that happens.
And it never happened. It had never happened to me. It gave me a lot of empathy, in some ways of just the tear. I never had that feeling you get on the scale and every day, like as a physician, I felt like something's got to be wrong with me medically because it's just going up. And it was really, it's scary. But I do think that part of the space that we're in now, transitioning out of the pandemic, I got vaccinated a couple of months ago. I've done a couple sort of businessy trips for the first time, actually just over the past week or two. It's been very, I don't know, it's been very...
Yeah, you're here. You're here in LA.
I was there in LA. I mean, it's been wonderful. It's been strange. It's been, I think one thing also I think one of the reasons I want, and I hope that people start really feeding their mental health and engaging with their body and people around them in a way to kind of promote mental health and mental fitness is, I just think there's a lot ahead of all of us. No matter what you experienced during the pandemic, there's just a lot coming for us emotionally that we have to process. If you lost somebody, I saw something like 1 in 3 people know someone who passed in the pandemic, and it's also like we haven't had any of our normal social rituals to to deal with things like grief or to celebrate. People missed like prom and graduation, and I mean, Serena, like, by the way, this is the book party. Like, you're my book launch party. Like, you and a few friends are like, welcome. I've never had 476 people at this book launch party, and so I just want to say that's awesome. And if we were together, I'd be serving you oysters on the half shell, and we'd be drinking kombucha, and there'd be some dancing, and it would be really fun. Everybody get a book. I'd sign every book there. And so we're all together on the internet, and I just want to thank you all for coming, and thank you, Serena, for hosting my little book launch party. I'm just trying to really enjoy every moment like that. Because anyway, just as a point of things have shifted so much for all of us, and as we process that, I think so often we think we don't. It's like if you're training for a race. When you have that deadline and you're conditioning, you go from exercising. My friend Adam Rosante said to me, he's like, well, there's a difference between exercising and training. And it's that's always that line always stuck in my mind, where as soon as you have a goal and you're working towards something, now you're training. And that is switched where, for me, as opposed to this thing I have to do, right? Is this thing that like I'm doing because I'm gonna achieve. For right now, for me, it's my new therapist and trainer is this giant horse that I can barely handle. But I
beautiful horse. I saw the story.
I was with him this morning. Yeah, he's a sweet boy. He's a big boy too, and I just need that. Anyway, so I need that. That just makes sense. I'm gonna mess up here. Yeah, I just need that right now. So, but the idea of going out there and just kind of hanging out with him versus you're working towards something. We're working towards jumping over some fences. I'm working on being able to not cramp up as I sit on him. So. Anyway, that's one of the reasons I want folks to focus on these foods and these power players, these things that, a lot of folks know, and it's probably everybody watching knows, avocados are good brain foods, and dark chocolate and wild salmon and anchovies. And in the book, I really try and get under some of the science of why that is and how it relates to food and brain health specifically, but also to emphasize ways that you incorporate those into your diet. I think from all of my days, kind of, probably being a kale pusher, right? There's a lot of misinformation about leafy greens and vegetables and kale. There's a lot of bad experience, a lot of kale trauma out there. Like
Dave Asprey pushes a lot of kale. I get it all the time. Dave Asprey says this. What's your feelings about kale? I'm like, kale's good. Kale's fine.
I know it's really been.
I used to have him on here and go toe to toe with him. Like we'll have to do like a panel. We have like our kale. Our kale lovers and our anti-kale.
Well, it's an interesting. I think kale for me is important because it's been my muse. Yeah. And kale, she has been so good to me over the years in terms of my creativity, my cooking, the nutrient density in my diet. In fact, in my slide deck, I have a slide. It's called the rule of kale. Brain food equals. When you think about what kale at least taught me. Kale taught me the role of nutrient density, which is central to nutritional psychiatry, which is looking at your food, right? The only reason you should count calories is to calculate nutrient density, right? I mean, Serena is 100% right, because then you're getting your best bang for the buck, right? It's eating efficiently. And the next rule for me, being a guy who I feel like the healthiest food is food in my easy to grow somebody's. That's right. I grew 52 varieties in that little patch down there that I showed earlier in the
Wow.
So kale's amazing to grow, easy to grow. Also, unlike a lot of plants where you grow it, right, and you're waiting and hoping like the raccoons don't get to it or like it doesn't frost, and then you hopefully pick it right. Kale is just like chucking off leaves left and right. We've got some kale plants that wintered over. I'll go see if there's any kale down there for sure. So nutrient density, culinary versatility, which is just, you can do a lot of different things with kale, just like with wild salmon, with anchovies, and all these cashews, dark chocolate. There's so many. One of my favorite recipes in here is the dark chocolate, the buckwheat cacao pancakes, which we make all the time. They're amazing and delicious and really nutrient dense because cacao nibs are full of fiber, magnesium, iron.
Dark chocolate.
Which I've got the whole, we have a whole little illustration on why it's great for you. And so culinary versatility, right? It's just, you can do a lot of fun things with it. And then the last is local availability. Now that's obviously not true for every grain food. My cacao tree won't grow here in Indiana. I'm not going to go fish fresh salmon out of the Ohio River. But as much as you can support your local foodscape, your local food system, it does a lot of things. Actually, the last week of the 6-week plan, we focus on 5 food categories. But I'm just going to give this away to everybody because I want you to do this. We're really asking you to think about yourself as an eater and an eater in connection with your local food web in some way. And that doesn't have to mean that you're always going to the farmer's market, but it does mean that you get curious about the eating environment in which you actually live and exist, which for so many, probably everyone watching, even if you're in a food desert, like right now I'm in a food desert, there's so much opportunity for us to engage with our food in a way that I think also supports our mental health. That it's not just all these amazing nutrients.
Sprouts. I said, and we can sprout too.
Sprouts, making sprouts, you're engaging with your food. Because I think a lot of people think of this stuff as like either expensive or you're being like a foodie. And I don't think that's true. This is the traditional human diet through the traditional foods that we've always eaten. Connecting with your culture of origin, to whatever that may be, to sort of understand more about yourself as an eater. I think it's just one of the most powerful things we can also do to support our mental health.
Yes, absolutely. And I actually wanted to ask you, and I'm going to let you take a peek, girl. That's one of my mental health buddies.
Oh, good. That's your,
Gizmo.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you, what was the inspiration for how you chose the color of your book? I know we highlighted on avocado favorite, dark chocolate favorite. We talked about kale. I mean, are these your go-to superfoods? And I use superfoods, kind of loosely. Like these are your go-to foods for mental health. Is that why you chose them?
I think each of those foods on the cover represents something really important to me personally. It's funny, no one's really sort of asked me that. It's such a nice question. I really want to just thank you for that. It really means a lot. It feels like you really see the book in a way that maybe I haven't experienced yet, and I really appreciate that. So they do, of course, represent, to me, lessons and in some ways controversy. Like one of the first ones had a big T-bone on there, but all my other books have meat on the cover. And not so much that I'm really wanting to be pro or anti-meat. I think as a psychiatrist, my job is really, in some ways, to try and transcend and help people to transcend diet culture and to really think, as I do as a psychiatrist, about you. And so what I'm most hopeful for, where I'm in the corner cheering, is you leading your life, your joyful life, and really feeling clear in your identity, which isn't my identity. My identity is an eater. There's some lessons I want you to share. I'm eating for brain growth. Yeah. I'm gentle and kind with myself when I do things like go get fast food or want pizza or want to drink a beer. But that each of us really has our own path in evolution eater. And so the book's on the cover. I mean, kale's up there because of my own personal journey with kale, but also what kale represents culturally. And then my position is kind of the past, in some ways, king of kale of Ireland with Jennifer Eastelow, another alchemist, food alchemist. I launched National Kale Day. She and I co-authored 50 Shades of Kale and then wanted to do more. And so I watched what happens as a healthy food emerges and gets called a fad food, which is not true. Kale, kokanen, is an ancient Irish dish. Yes. Everyone talks about the potatoes saving them. There was the kale as well, or that it's full of toxin. Every single food we eat accumulates its environment for us.
Yes.
Whether it's an anchovy, whether it's a red bean, when if you grow stuff in soil full of toxins, it's like plants like vacuum cleaners. They don't know. They're just trying to get the nutrients. The red beans are there because red beans, surprisingly, since we talk about antioxidants so much, no one's asked this question. They're up there also. And so that's the USDA top antioxidant containing food. I also put them up there because there's this debate going on about plants that I think is highly, highly misinformed and suspicious. And I think it's confused eaters.
You're talking about the lectins?
It's made me angry.
Yeah.
So I just put red beans on my cover. The anchovies are there because those are a challenge for me. And I think they're a challenge for everybody. Small fish, oily fish. We know they're great for our brain health because they have so many omega-3 fats and B12. And for all the women watching, small fish like anchovies are also the top source of calcium because all those little tiny bones. But many of us having grown up in cultures, I grew up on a farm in Indiana, like seafood was disgusting to me. And so those little fish, and the fact I use them all the time and I love them and I feed them to my kids and I've learned about them, for me personally represents my biggest evolution as an eater. The olive oil is there in the top right hand corner in really a place of power because olive oil is the thing that we all tend to agree on.
Yeah.
And it's, if you think about the major fat that I eat, besides going for those omega-3 fats, I consume a lot of olive oil. Avocados are there just because, they're a brain food. We all recognize them. But I think, again, they also represent to me fat and a fatty food and kind of how I think about fats, which, again, is really wanting to move everyone away from fear-based information.
Yes.
Right? There's like little secret, like, you didn't know about that toxin, did you? Kale's toxic now. It's like horrible and confusing to me. It's the people who are doing that. I've begun in 2021 in the era of wokeness to really feel there's almost a kind of bullying component when you see this, right? There's this, it reminds me of how like the bullies treated me on the playground, right? Where there's this like thing you didn't know. And like, oh, you're doing that thing that you thought was cool. And it's just like, I recognize you from the playground. I'm not scared of you anymore. Anyway, the dark chocolate is there because people think about dieting and health and food advice is deprivation, right? That this needs to be your guilty pleasure that you sneak and don't tell me about. And I have a dark chocolate challenge going on right now, and it's encouraging me to eat dark chocolate every single freaking day.
What? I didn't know you
chocolate.
Dark
So
chocolate.
we're doing brain challenges as we go up to lunch. So every week we focused on blueberries, super easy one. We focused on avocados. This week is chocolate week. And I'm looking through my bag. This is like moment of truth. Are you a real brain foodie?
Wait, I've had dark chocolate all over my house.
Yeah, that's like somewhere in there is a bar of dark chocolate.
You guys, we're gonna have to join this dark chocolate challenge.
I encourage all 100 of you. There it is. I'm rumbling around. Here, we'll just get it done because it's just important to eat it every day. Woo!
Yes, I can't wait for mine.
Go chocolate dance. Now I tell you not to eat on the internet or live TV, and I always forget that.
Whatever. You could do. I fix my hair. I drink my matcha. I play with gizmo.
I love the dark chocolate.
You can do whatever you want.
It pulls you right into the mindfulness of food.
Yeah.
And so, along with eating, I think, that sitting with it and the way that that's all it takes to really.
That's part of culinary alchemy.
Do something to your nervous system and your brain.
You gotta connect with it.
And so the theobromines, all these phytonutrients in there, along with the magnesium and iron and fiber that you get. Right, I'm also taking in these phytonutrients. We also call them antioxidants. Upgrade your knowledge. There's so much more than antioxidants. They're signaling molecules. So now what's happening over the next probably 20, 30 minutes from the theobromines in there, I'm getting a dumping of some dopamine. I'm going to get more oxygenation into my brain based on some fMRI data that came out about how these sort of how chocolate affects us. There is going to be a kind of sense of uplifting of dopaminergic stuff, basically uplifting, energized, focused. But what's also interesting is, unlike a lot of stimulants that get you revved up, dark chocolate has actually been shown to help reduce stress and depression in medical students during exams. There's a piece of correlational data that's really interesting that dark chocolate eaters, like daily dark chocolate eaters, or daily dark chocolate consumption is correlated with a like 60%, 60 to 70% decreased risk of depression. So that's why dark chocolate is there. It's just it's just a powerful and interesting food. Eggs are there because of choline. So many people have heard all this depression data. They're like, I got anxiety. Like the mood's good, except that I'm worried all the time. And there's not as much data as I would like about anxiety. I pulled all of it for the book. But choline is interesting because choline is really the only nutrient that's been clearly in correlational data shown to make a difference with anxiety disorder risk. And then eggs, of course, are so controversial.
Yeah.
Right? And for me, also, eggs, like anchovies, are a seminal food in terms of my own personal story of having chickens and raising chickens and understanding where eggs done properly fit within the farm cycle. That it's a perfect, I would say, until the raccoons got my chickens, it was one of the most perfect, beautiful, symbiotic relationships I'd been in with my family and our little flock of chickens. We hatched them in June. So we had this really nasty rooster I bought off the internet, Randy, who then impregnated our hens. And then we bought an incubator and incubated them. And it's crazy. You just take this egg, and instead of eating it, you put it in the incubator, and 21 days later, you hear this tap, tap, tap. This little tiny wet, like chicken, little chick. And then about 6 hours later, it's this little puffy thing, looks like Easter. And then they imprint on you. Yeah. And so we go out there, and they come over, they fly on my shoulders. I mean, it's really, and then you get eggs, and then you let them out in your garden, and they're scratching around, and they're pooping. And so that's why the eggs are there. That I hope that was a little loose. I hope that made sense. The eggs are there because it's a perfect protein, and it forces people to reconsider, or at least think and consider, how messaging like don't eat cholesterol, don't eat saturated fat, how much that is driving the bus in terms of how you eat. Because I think that those are pieces of advice to take within context. Pepitas are there because pepitas, zinc is such an important nutrient, and I love talking about zinc because I get to talk about oysters. But I love talking about zinc also because I get to talk about pepitas. And again, in terms of foods that are really, people say, like, how does this change how you eat? Well, pepitas came on. I love chopping them up. I put them in my pesto, put them in my smoothies. Just a great source of three things. Tryptophan, not as that important. It's just tryptophan is the most rare amino acid. It's what you make serotonin of. I don't think you should take it in supplement form, but I think you should take it in pepita form. And then zinc is in iron. And again, they're the plant-based forms, so not quite as absorbable. That's why I chop mine up and cook them a little bit usually. But I'll put that in a great way to jazz up salads. And then red peppers are there just because that's my son's favorite plant and vegetable to eat. And so again, and it's one of all those are the power players, or some of the power players, where these are the foods that really. We try not to focus on specific foods, but we focus on those are each food category. So let's say you hate pepitas, you like cashews, awesome. Or let's say red bell peppers, like for whatever reason you don't want to eat nightshades. You're on Tom Brady's diet, you're anti-nightshades. Like, where I think a lot of folks giving expert advice or health advice, like, you got to eat the red peppers to be on the Ramsey diet, and that's just not how I roll in any way. I'd wonder, okay, red peppers are in the food category of rainbows, or as we say, they're rainbows. What are the colorful plants do you like? You like strawberries? You like tomatoes? Oh, you don't want to eat a nightshade? Okay. Like what? How can we think about some other colorful vegetables where you're going to get carotenoids? You like sweet potatoes? Because it's that food category that you want to try and flesh out. If there's a food category that you just aren't going to eat, again, instead of trying to convince you to be vegan or convince you to be carnivore, I'm interested in thinking like, okay, you don't eat seafood. You think it's gross. Well, one, can we can we flex that? Like fish tacos are amazing, sushi's amazing, ceviche, and a lot of times people say, I haven't tried that, or, but to think what nutrients maybe you're not getting, like if you're struggling with your mood or anxiety, and you haven't eaten any meat and seafood for a long time, it means you haven't gotten any long chain omega-3 fats in your diet, and even though you make some of those in your liver, they're essential. You need to eat them. Well, now, it's an interesting time to be a eater. There are ways you can, I generally don't recommend supplementation. There's a way you can supplement those long-chain omega-3 fats, EPA and DHA. There's also some foods, like if you're a vegan because you don't want to eat anything that is a mother or has a face, there's a way that, it's interesting to think, well, what about a mussel? A mussel has all the nutrients that you need from fish. It's definitely doesn't have a face. It's mother is probably debatable, but, and I don't mean to make light of those issues, but more of, asking people to explore the food category, not just to reject it. Like, I don't eat seafood, when I was a kid, I didn't eat pie. Like, it's super weird, right? And like, I'm glad I figured that out. I'm glad I've tried a variety of pies now. It's still not my favorite thing, to be honest, but I don't know, like a life without ever eating pie, that would have been sad. Like coconut cream pie, like that's really good. But I thought it was disgusting when I was like going back. I don't know why. So I'm curious, and I know everybody watching is curious because they're curious about, and we're both curious then. What foods make a difference for your mental health? Like, are there some really good go-to foods that you have? And I was wondering also, just as a chef, I was thinking I'm going to be on here with a chef. Like, are there a couple of things that really make a difference, you think, in terms of how people do a better job cooking for mental health in the kitchen? Those are two questions, but I wanted to ask you about those.
Oh, no, thank you for asking. You actually highlighted on several products and ingredients. I have a lot of favorites on your cover as well. I always talk about eat the rainbow because you get the whole spectrum of phytonutrients. And not just I talk about culinary alchemy. So I'm very much about feeding our physical body and all the nutrients we gather to support our organ systems, but also spiritual nutrition. You're eating to support your energy centers. And so I focus a lot on grounding foods, when I'm talking about eating for stress or anxiety. So reaching for those cardinal rich foods, red, orange, foods that come from the earth. They're mineral nutrient dense and rich. And so, if you feel like you need to feel grounded, if you're having fear and anxiety, I'm always like, think about what comes from the earth. What do you have to pull out of the dirt? Reach for those root vegetables. And
it's such a good recommendation. It's so funny. It's when I was having a lot of stress and some gut problems, and potatoes like have a bad name. Yes. If you're struggling with your gut health. Good. Oh my gosh, like cooked root vegetables were just like, I remember I'd eat them and I was like the only food for a while. It's just like, it made everything relax. Like I was relaxed. Like, but I love that. I think that's really wonderful advice. And I'd add on to that of getting close to that dirt.
Oh yeah.
And that's one of the blessings that we've had of being out here in the country of just, I was looking a year ago, I had a little reminder photo and it showed that we were like prepping beds and I kind of drove up to the farm and I was thinking, man, it's got this little like tinge of green everywhere. It just warmed up. And really like, oh my gosh, it's spring. But I love those grounding foods, and I love also that idea of using food in that way, because so often people are like, oh, it's carb craving, right? And if you kind of think about it as like, well, maybe a way to think about that is you're really feeling quite ungrounded.
Yeah.
And if you can
it's going to be in my book, where I'm talking about this. And I love when you talked about chocolate, because chocolate and say blueberries, they're so nurturing for our third eye, for stress and grief. You went through the nutrients that are in dark chocolate and why it can actually, help your mind and support your brain. Just your.
It's crazy science. I mean, literally, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's like literally the only molecule that I know of. I could be wrong on this, but so far the only molecule I've seen in clinical research that's reversed age-related memory decline. So let's say you're like in your 60s, and it's just you're losing a step. Like I'm in my late 40s, I'm doing pretty okay. But if you stress me out, I don't sleep, I'll start I'll change a word, or I won't be able to find a name. It's a little scary. So they gave those folks a really high dose of these flavanols, like an extract, every day, and they found changes in their what's called the dentate gyrus. It's this part of the brain that's really specific for memory, and they found that the memory kind of went back to like the memory and cognitive ability of people in their 50s. So I just think it's we should all take all this research with a little grain of salt, but at the same time, when I see consistent positive research that also connects with tradition and common sense.
Yes. And so it makes it attainable and digestible and something that we can all do, and it just empowers you and your family, and it's something that you're like, oh, this is what I can do for myself with mental health, and it doesn't require a prescription or a fancy machine. It's just food. So
I have a specific question that I know I asked you technique, but I'm curious how you'd recommend that spiritually I deal better with the I guess I'm going to call it the processed food movement, but there's such a movement around laboratory grown foods and imitation meats, and and I guess I do feel it as a spiritual problem in a certain way. I guess is why I wanted to ask you that because I feel my own bias, right? That I think I believe in the mother and the matriarchy and in Mother Earth and the foods that come from there. The reason we're unhealthy is that we've turned from that. It's not that we need something new. It's not that we need a fake hamburger. That's not the solution. It's not that we need a mushroom grown special protein but it feels like it feels to not be like interested and enthusiastic and part of the debate is kind of not right, and it feels to be like angry and judgmental is not right. And then as a health expert, I feel a little confused about what to do because I feel really strongly about it in a way that I don't think I've ever felt before. That it's such a deviation from what is going to, and packaged in a way that's healthy. That if so that's a long-winded question, but I was wondering if you could give me a little consult here on Monday.
Well, we're coming up to the hour, so my answer will probably be much more brief than what I'd like it to be. So, we could even come back on and debate on it and share. When it comes to lab-grown foods, it's just, I clearly am a believer of whole foods first, and it's that whole connection that's with nature. Spiritually, there's an energy that connects, like everything is quantum, right? Everything has a resonance. And that natural resonance, that energy that we get from the earth, that we get from what's grown from the earth, that to me is all part of what brings in our whole body wellness. I understand their efforts to reduce the environmental effects that come from raising livestock, and that is a whole. I feel that this is one of the ways we're trying to offset that. But I agree with you. So there's that effort, and I recognize that because there is a lot of damage that's contributed to our environment because of the way we're raising livestock, and it's the way we're doing it, and it's not just here, but it's global.
I think Serena, the thing that I'm sorry, Serena. The thing that sorry to get your name on that. I was just thinking that the thing that shifted actually is I think you can make that argument about both plants and animals. What you just said. I think whether it's soybeans or cattle.
100%.
There's efficiencies there, but there's a way that somehow like the soybeans now are being framed as really the good choice for the environment. And not that there aren't obvious kind of concerns about factory farming, but and I guess it's also maybe just respecting that other people might feel differently, and that groundedness that you and I get from whole foods diets and from resonating with our food and wanting to, kind of be in the midst of that cycle and that pattern as we nourish ourselves, that other people feel differently. And anyway, thank you for that.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And I actually would love to chat with you more about it, either online or offline, because I think it's such an important topic. It could even be something we talk about on Clubhouse or something where,
I'd love to do a Clubhouse with you on that, because I'm sure there are things like, I think it's part of being a psychiatrist. And they have a really strong opinion.
Not that
I back away from it. It just especially when it sticks around and there's just something that I feel that people are being duped. And
I share that sentiment a little bit because it's being marketed as something that's very healthy, which I have all kinds of opinions about. My sister's like, you're close to time, so thank you, lady. Okay, so what we'll do is, I'm going to text you after this, and we'll set up a Clubhouse. So you guys, and we'll do this because I think it's such a great topic. So if you guys don't follow me yet, follow me in Clubhouse. It's Serena Poon, not
and me too. I just joined Clubhouse. I don't even know what I'm doing there, but I'm going to go on with Serena there sometime.
And good, and we'll connect. I'm going to be on there tonight. We're going to do another cooking segment, which people love. So join us there, and then I can give you a shout out and get some followers over to your account. And then real quick, Dr. Ramsey, we have been doing giveaways when there are incredible books that are being shared to the world. So I'm wondering if you'd be open to a giveaway to our viewers. And if that's the case,
I'm open to a giveaway, or I'd like to sign. I say yes, but only if I can sign it to you and you send us your address, and so I can. And also, I'd like to, as long as I can sign it and send a dark chocolate bar with it, then I.
bonus, you guys. Okay, so what you guys know the drill. If you guys have been following None Other Lives, you just screenshot this live, and then tag me, tag Dr. Ramsey, post it, put it up on your stories. And I want you to make it a little bit more challenging. I want you to let us know a takeaway that you took. You know, at least one. If you put more entries, takeaway from our conversation today. What have you learned? Something that you learned, something that you love, something that you're going to start this week. And we'll pick a winner. I'll send the address. I'll DM you and I'll post it. So stay tuned on stories. And Dr. Ramsey is going to send you a signed book and a bar of chocolate. So that's like awesome. And if you are a private account, at least DM it to me so that I can see it. Don't forget, I want to know your takeaway. I want to know what you've learned. And for those of you who are still on, because you're amazing that you're still on, even though we're like 2 minutes away from being cut off by Instagram, go to the bottom right here, the bottom where I've pinned a comment, and follow Dr. Ramsey. Go to his Instagram account, buy his book, because it's just going to help you. And really, if you go to his account, you're going to see all his other books too. All the wealth of information that he shares. So, and then stay connected because we're going to do a clubhouse soon. We're going to talk about more things. So thank you so much for coming on today, Doctor. I know we could have gone on for like another hour, but
we'll have to do it again. And everyone, thank you so much for being so engaged, seeing all these hearts. And I'm an author in the middle of book launch, and so I appreciate. Please check out our website through RamseyMD.com and sign up for our newsletter. But also, I just appreciate everyone sticking around, and I look forward to maybe engaging on Clubhouse or coming on again so I can answer your questions as well as just chatting. But I hope this information is helpful, and I'm just going to reiterate what I said. Make sure and feed your mental health. Do it today. Join the Dark Chocolate Challenge. And then, Serena, thank you so much for just such wonderful energy and your really, really personal and touching questions. Nobody's asked me why I picked these images on the book before.
So
and it just really meant a lot to me to get to go through those with you like that. I haven't done that. And so that means a lot. And it's nice to feel a special connection with you. I look forward to meeting you in person sometime soon.
Yes,
and
me
thank
too.
you so much, everybody.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. And then I'm going to text you right after this, Dr. Ramsey. I'll see you in a second.
All right.
All right. Bye, guys. See you soon.